shooting wedding and commercial filmmaking for the last 15 years. And one thing that is one of the hardest parts of filmmaking is focus. You know, you have to make sure that all of your video clips are in focus. And for years and years and years, until the last 2 years, we have always manually focused. Well, what happened was, whenever we first started, we were like, let's try out autofocus for that moment. And it bit us in the butt.
Yeah.
It didn't work. So we like, okay, well, we're never going to do that again. So we thought. So 2 years ago when the 6500 came out, that was our first foray into trying out autofocus, and we couldn't be happier.
Right, and it really absolutely, totally revolutionized the way we approach not just some of the high-end weddings we do, but also our corporate work, and we're dipping our toes into some of the mini documentaries, and it just changes the way we approach those shoots.
So we always thought, we were under the impression that if you use autofocus, you're not a professional.
Right.
But what you have to realize is, you know, on professional studio sets, they have somebody that pulls focus for the camera operator. So it's generally a team of people working, and whereas whenever we're shooting together, it's just the two of us. So, you know, like if you think about it that way, it helps to alleviate some stress. But we always just thought, you know, there's no way, like, you shouldn't use autofocus whenever you're a professional. That's just, it's not professional.
Right, and I would show my other filmmaker friends and be bragging to them, say, look at this amazing shot I got of somebody walking across the room towards me. I shot this sucker at 1.4. Look how amazing I pulled that focus. And they're like, wow, that's pretty impressive. But what I didn't show them was the other 30 clips where I totally missed it and had them to do it over and over until I can make sure and nail that focus.
Yeah, so there was a lot of practice involved, and not
Right.
only that, you know, like when you're shooting weddings, you have multiple people coming toward you at this, you know, at varying levels of speed, and sometimes, you know, one bridesmaid will walk really slowly, the next one will walk really quickly, so you never know what you're going to get. So yeah, you can probably nail the focus on a couple of them, but not all of them, and not the full length of the aisle. So
right.
That was something that was always a struggle for us, and we would have good days and bad days. Like, we would have days where we focused like perfectly and we got the whole shot, and there were days where we could only use about 20–30% of
maybe
of the
40 for me. But.
Oh yeah, yeah. 20–30, but you know, so that's whenever we had to start, you know, we'll just fix this with slow motion at that point, you know, we'll just try to slow this down so we can get the most as possible. So again, autofocus for filmmaking, we were just totally against it for so long. And over the last 15 years, we've only been using it for, what, 1.5 years consistently.
Right, and it's such an important day. You know, we're not filming a major motion film, but it's so important to the family. The family has invested not only the time, but their money into hiring us to tell their story in a very film-like and cinematic way. And to not have everything in focus all the time. You know, we get a lot of the stuff manually, but to have the autofocus to make sure we capture every single moment in perfect clarity is so important to us, because we are making an heirloom for this family, and I want to make sure that I capture everything and have every option to give them.
So as we mentioned before, whenever we first started filmmaking, autofocus was something that was really, really poor for video.
Right.
This was about 15 years ago. We were using camcorders at the time. The revolution hadn't started yet for smaller cameras, and so we just totally stopped trusting autofocus. We were just totally done with it. And so whenever you lose trust in something, then you gain fear. Like, you have a fear of it then after that. And so
we just wrote it off. We're not going to ever use this, because when we would try to use it, again, this is many, many years ago, you know, you would have, especially for video, it would hunt, so it would go to somebody's face and then could push past them and then come back and kind of breathe a little bit before it would lock in on focus. And that we just said we could not use that until.
Well, and then, but the other thing is, you know, you really get stuck in a rut of how you've always done things.
Set in your ways, yeah.
So you get set in your ways, and it's like, well, I've always done it this way. I'm not going to change. I'm not even going to. Whenever we first got cameras that could autofocus well in video, I told Garrett, I don't think I'm gonna like that. I wrote it off in my mind mentally, even though we knew that the cameras could handle it. I was like, I'm probably not gonna like that. I probably won't use it very often. And here we are today.
Right. And it was crazy once we started using it. You know, I still had projects and footage that I was working on before I started to use it that I would be looking at that project and then comparing that to the project that we just shot last weekend, and I'm like, I cannot wait until my editing catches up with the new projects because everything's in focus, and that's, you know, it's so great. I don't have to skim through all of my footage and cut on the cutting room floor and throw away those clips that are just a bit soft. I had more options and more story to tell because I had more and more in focus.
And again, we just had in our mind that real professionals don't use autofocus, so why should we? We're real professionals. We've been paid to shoot video for so long. Like, we're a real professional. We don't need it. And
right.
We were basically wrong.
Absolutely.
We were wrong.
I'll be the first to admit it, yes.
And Garrett was the first one to start using autofocus with like the 6500. So whenever it came out, I think it was like 2 years ago at Photo Plus, wasn't it? I believe it was the first time that, and then we got our hands on it a few months later. We shot our first wedding with it, and Garrett was terrified to use the autofocus.
I was, yeah.
For the bride coming down the aisle, that one shot that you could never redo, he was terrified to use it. So he had me walk down the aisle over and over and over and over, just testing it to see if he could trust it. And we went ahead and gave it a go that day, and the rest is history. And so now, after that, he was shooting with the A9, and now we're using the A7R3 and the A7 III, and we couldn't be happier. It's so much easier. So, like on the A7 III, like I was talking about, it uses phase detection. It has 693 phase detection autofocus points that cover 93% of the image area. So you're getting a huge portion of your image that has autofocus. But in conjunction with that, for video, it also uses contrast detection autofocus. So that's where you're really, you know, you're getting in focus, but you're getting crystal clear images or, you know, video clips that way.
Right, and that phase detection really helps with object recognition. So the camera is I hated to admit it, but I'm like, how does this little box, you know, I've been pulling focus professionally for, you know, at that point, 12, 13 years. How is this little box? I didn't want to admit that it could do it so much better than I could. But when somebody's walking towards you, or, you know, a horse is coming by, or if you're shooting sports, or even we shot the Red Bull Air Races a few weekends ago, it's just amazing how it can predict the motion of what's going on in your frame, and through object recognition, which it does very well, grab onto that and stay in focus.
So for video, we're going to talk about the top 5 benefits of using phase detection autofocus.
Yep.
First of all, it alleviates some of the stress of shooting. So if any of you have shot video before, there are so many things that you have to worry about, and whenever we're doing live events or we're doing any type of coverage, even our commercial work is very much run and gun, and so it just takes one of those things away that we have to worry about.
Right, I'm no longer just stressing out. You know, sometimes you can be out in the bright sunlight, we're on a construction site shooting or anything really, and I take my glasses off because I'm fighting getting bifocals. But anyways, that's a totally another discussion. But so, you know, my glasses are off, and I'm looking at the back of the monitor, making sure it's just in super tack sharp focus. And so I don't have as much brain power, I guess, to concentrate on my composition, to concentrate on how I want to creatively expose. Do I want to expose for the highlights? Do I want to make a silhouette? Do I want to expose for the shadows? So by having that stress alleviated, I no longer have to worry about, is it in focus? I can concentrate more on, you know, my composition and my creative flow.
All of this was autofocus, and it just helps us to take that one thing away so that we can really focus on other things. And it also helps like with eye strain and different things that we have to worry about on a wedding day.
And here we have a moving shot where I'm on a gimbal, the bride and groom are moving, I'm moving, and the focus is locked onto their face because I do have face detection turned on, so it knows to ignore the trees, it knows to ignore the background, people walking, it looks at those close faces, locks on those faces, and I can move freely with my gimbal and be able to maintain focus.
Right, and then another thing that's very difficult whenever you're manually focusing, and it's very difficult for cameras to, as well, even cameras before these, is to track subjects coming toward you. That's a very difficult thing for cameras to do, and for us to do manually as well. So we're able to use face detection, autofocus, and put it over, you know, the little flower girl's face.
And then when I want to change focus,
right.
I can just touch the screen if I want to jump to another face, and it jumps to the
little guy.
And while that's happening, the focus is so quick, I can turn around, shoot the groom, turn around, shoot the groom's dad sitting there, and then still have enough time to whip around and shoot the bride coming down the aisle. Now we're going to zoom in to 200%. On a 4K screen at 200%, look how tack sharp she is, full autofocus. All I'm doing is making sure my framing is the way I want it and my exposure is the way I want it, and I'm totally trusting the autofocus system with face detection.
And for this clip, we always talk about how, you know, watch the bride's dad as he's looking at her, and he's doing all these adorable
Can't stop looking at her.
He can't stop looking at her, and there were, you know, if we were only getting 30% of that, we would have missed out on some of those little adorable glances over at her. So
I may have got one or two of them, but I definitely wouldn't have gotten all of them.
Right, and then another thing that it's perfect for the autofocus is gimbal work. We judged a filmmaking competition earlier this year, and we were astounded at the amount of gimbal shots that were out of focus.
It's hard.
It's
really
very hard. So we're going to show you a few clips here, but do you want to, this is Garrette's forte, is using the gimbal, so I'll let him talk about that.
I love the gimbal because it introduces motion to my shots, and right now I'm using the 12 to 24G, and at this event they had this amazing band walking around playing, and everybody was getting in behind them, just having a good time, and I like using that 12 to 24 on the gimbal because I can get right in there in the action, and the action kind of engulfs you. And that last shot was not a drone shot. It was the gimbal on top of a monopod with that 12mm, so it looked really big. But you know, getting those motion movements with a wide-angle lens, especially, you can get these really epic shots. This shot I couldn't have got shooting manual focus because as I'm moving away from the cake, the distance is changing, and so I'm going to go soft on that focus. So beforehand, you know, when I used to use the gimbal on manual focus, if Amber was my subject, I would have to, wherever she's moving, like if it was on a dance floor like that, if they moved that way, I had to move that way and try my best to match that distance, and I would sometimes do great, and sometimes, you know, I had my days. But like with this shot, they're ballroom dancing, I'm using a 50 Sony Zeiss at 1.4 because I love shooting the wide open aperture because it just gives me that creamy cinematic film look, and I'm able just to dance around the ballroom floor with them and just capture some great moments like this. And with that compression of the 50 and doing shots like you just saw there, you get a really cinematic look where the background is moving quite a bit faster than your subject, and it's just, you know, I call that the Beyonce shot.
Yes.
As her hair is just like bouncing and all beautiful, but it just makes my life. I use the gimbal a lot more now, and if you're not familiar with the gimbal, it's just a device. You put the camera on, you can walk around with it, and it keeps it nice and steady. So it just lets me get shots I never would have dreamed of getting without a second person pulling focus remotely for me. We worked on a project with Disney a few months ago for one of their TV shows, and we were shooting supplementary content for them. The three main cameras for the shoot, other than us, they all had a separate audio guy, and each camera operator had a guy doing nothing but had a monitor and a wireless focus puller, so the operator did not have to worry about. And that's what Sony has done for us, is they have hired a focus puller, pulled him up, and set him in our camera, so that's just something we don't have to worry about, and we're just couldn't be happier.
One thing to really consider and think about, though, is, you know, these are moments that you cannot redo.
Right.
A lot of the moments that we're capturing are things that you can't redo. So shooting that at 1.4 and using autofocus is actually kind of a little bit crazy, but we're able to get some really amazing cinematic motion shots with the autofocus.
Right, we're asking a lot.
We are asking
that small
a lot.
Little box, yeah.
Right. So the face detection is the object recognition. That is one of the things that has revolutionized, because a lot of what we shoot is people. Even commercial work, everything is people. We're storytellers. We like to figure out, even if it's a company, we like to figure out what their story is and interview people. So we use face
here's a great example of, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
It's okay.
Great
Go
example.
ahead.
I just get excited about it because it just works so well. This is a sample of, most of the time when I'm shooting the processional, I'm on 7200. Sometimes I'm in the crop mode and even maybe punched in a little bit with clear image zoom. So I'm every bit of 300 millimeter. So on a monopod, every little motion you do, if I'm just sitting here like, oh, my feet are hurting and I'm shifting my weight, the lens is just going to move a little bit. Now, if I had an autofocus point on the screen that didn't have face detection, as they were coming towards me, and if my camera moved a little bit and that focus point moved, it might jump to those trees behind him. But now, even if I do move my camera a little bit, it has like a stickiness, so that it'll stick to the face longer. Like it's given me a grace period. Like, are you sure you want to go back to those trees? And if I don't, my camera comes back around and settles down, because it's totally my fault for moving it around. It stays on that face, and that's a feature that can be adjusted, so you can speed that up or slow it down.
Is stickiness a technical term?
That's exactly what it says in the Encyclopedia of Technical Terms.
I think inside the menu it actually says stickiness, right?
No.
So actually, you can't.
This sample here, I'm sorry, there's a lot of room between them and the trees behind them, and if the focus would have jumped, it would have took me a while to recover from that, and I probably would have missed that moment of her crying with her dad. So because the face detection locks in, I'm golden.
And you can adjust, basically you can adjust anything about the autofocus, but you can adjust how long it will linger on that face before it jumps to something else. Okay, and so finally, touchscreen. That was a huge upgrade for autofocus. You can, if you're not wanting it to, do the object recognition and, lock onto the faces, you can touch the screen, like say you're moving, you're wanting to like rack focus from one thing to another. So you can touch the one thing, and like say it's like a vase of flowers, and then you can touch something else in the background, and it will, it'll rack focus for you. And you can change how quickly it does that as well.
So it'll jump really fast, or it'll be a more organic, it'll look like there's a man on a manual lens pulling focus. It'll be a nice smooth move. Or if you're if you're shooting a lot of short clips, you can turn it up really fast, so like I'm shooting you, and then if I turn to Amber, it hits her immediately, come back, boom, locks on you, and so on and so forth. But it's really, and that speaks to the customizability of the camera and what you can do with it to make it yours.
Right. And then we're going to go through a few of the quick settings that we use for autofocus. So again, I'm on the A7 R3 and Garrett's on the A7 III, and of course it's continuous autofocus in video mode. Garrett uses flexible spot medium.
I use flexible spot medium just because I like sometimes to have a little more control, and when I'm running at 1.4, and I like to get down and dirty into the crowd. So I maybe, like if I was shooting Amber right now, I would be like back in the crowd on my knees shooting through everything, and I want just a pinpoint spot to be in focus, so that's where I might turn that on, whereas as opposed to using the full wide autofocus, and I can just hit the screen and bump it around, and I still, override it occasionally, but it works great. Yes.
Right, and then I like to use expand flexible spot, and that's another custom setting that you can change how long the autofocus stays in one specific area.
The stickiness.
The stickiness. We're going to change the stickiness. Did you want to talk about your custom button you have on the back that will cancel out your focus?
Yes, thank you. So nowadays I run about 90% of the day in autofocus. Last weekend we did a same-day edit for our couple, which means we showed the wedding highlight, about a 6-minute film, at the reception. And autofocus really helps me accomplish that because I spend less time worrying about the focus. But I have a button, I'm sure you're familiar with back button focus for photography. I kind of do the same thing, but opposite for video. So I'm running in autofocus all the time, and then I have one of my custom buttons set up to when I punch it, it cancels autofocus. So if I want to do a creative a focus pull between two things, foreground and background. I just want to get it done real quick. I can tap that button, cancels autofocus, do what I need to do, and then hit it, and I'm back to the races. Very seldom am I using that, but it's there if I need it.
Right. And so in summary, of course, again, it's one less thing on a wedding day or any commercial shoot we have to worry about.
Right.
Is focusing. It takes away the eye strain. We've talked about that. And then our focus hit ratio has increased tremendously. You know, we're able to get longer shots that are in focus, and that makes our images sharper.
Yeah.
Yes, so with the phase detection and contrast detection together, makes our images, video images so much sharper.
And 4K doesn't lie, so we always shoot in 4K, and it's not so bad when you deliver in 1080, but when the client wants 4K and you deliver in 4K.
Or you're watching it on this giant screen in 4K.
On a huge screen.
You can't lie.
People are going to be pixel peeping you and checking your work. It has to be rock solid.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to be hanging out at the booth today. If you see us anytime throughout the day, make sure you ask any questions that you have. But I think that's it for now.
Yes, thank you so much for
listening
listening to
us. Thank
us.
you so much.
Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.